Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy technology principles applications. This video is about the magnetic energy model of the universe. This video is in no way comprehensive, so we'll probably have additional topics or whatever, additional videos about the same topic. Whatever. More points about the model. Now, this is not a traditional mathematical scientific model. I'm using the word model loosely. Okay, this is a model of the universe that is more conceptual in nature. So as we progress in technology, because this is a technology-driven model, not a mathematical-driven model, but once that scientists and mathematicians have the ability to mathematically map subatomic particles with greater accuracy, and the interdimensional exchange of those subatomic particles and the neutral energies, and they can incorporate a lot of infinities and a lot of randomness into the equations, then this mathematical model of the magnetic energy it'll be created at that point. And then it will be very interesting because it will be a whole deeper understanding of the universe and how everything's working. A simple analogy of this would be imagine we are in a simulation right now, we're characters in a video game. And so far, in the last 100 years, and then even way back in recorded history, scientists have been kind of acting like characters in the game. So they're looking around the game saying, how does this work? How are we being held down in the game? How is gravity working in the game? What is that what's that matter made of? And they're looking at the game from the perspective of being in the game as a character in the game, if that makes any sense. And so what magnetic energy does is it gets you beyond being a character in the game. It gets you to the actual encoding of the game. So in our society, it would be it takes you to the ones and zeros. It takes you to the nature of reality beyond the illusion, if you want to call it that, the illusion of our universe, of the physical universe. So it takes you beyond empiricism into the interdimensional world and the subatomic world, and lets you look at really how things are working from that level. And so it's wow, how do you look beyond this fake reality? It's not a fake reality, and I don't know why people say that, but it's as real as everything else. So enough of that. Let's get into the magnetic energy model of the universe. So first of all, as this model is fleshed out and it becomes more developed, it will be like the grand unified theory. So it will cover, because it explains everything from subatomic particles all the way up to galactic systems and then beyond that. So it's this idea that it is one force throughout the universe that has many different manifestations. And as those manifestations are understood better, scientists will see that the electromagnetic force, the gravitational force, the magnetic force, that they are all the same force. The base of them is all the same force, but they have different manifestations that create those different phenomena. So that's number one in the whole thing, that it really is like the grand unified field theory. Now, in this model, there's no such thing as space, because the idea of space doesn't really fit this model. So what exactly is space? So there's energy everywhere. Now, you can call it an etheric model of the universe, and that's fine, and I've been using that word all through these videos because we lack the terminology to really describe what's happening. But so the 0-point energy, 0-point field, essentially that there's energy everywhere no matter where you're at in the universe. So space doesn't really exist. When we're traversing something, we're traversing energy. And that's really critical, because as you learn how to tap into that energy and utilize that energy, you realize that it becomes part of your transportation, especially faster than light speed. So a fundamental thing of this model is the attraction of likes. And that is the idea that similar energies attract each other, and that is the fundamental process that creates a pressure flow, which is another concept in the model, that there's a pressure flow throughout the universe that's based on the attraction of likes. So energy moves through our system from dimension to dimension to dimension, all based on the attraction of lights and the attraction of energy. Even when you see like an expulsion of energy, let's say there's like a solar flare or coronal mass ejection, that explosion, the fundamental principle behind that explosion is an attraction of like energy that is creating the reaction that creates that explosion, if that makes sense. So the idea that, like in this model, for example, when you're talking about a sun, it's not a compressed nuclear furnace. It is a it's a system of etheric or magnetic energy that is going through a transmutation process. That energy is being attracted interdimensionally through that system, which then creates all of the reactions, and that could be the pulses of light, it could be the energy emissions. Everything that happens is fundamentally based on the attraction of lights in that system and the pressure flow that is created from that interdimensional and attraction of energy. So now, another fundamental concept in this model is that there is a neutral component of all energy. And well, you could say, well, yeah, because even in the atomic model, we have things that are called neutrons, and scientists have put a lot of labels on things that include like neutrinos and neutrons and different types of neutral energy. But in the magnetic model, the neutral energy serves an incredibly vital component because it allows for a spectrum of polarized and neutral energies to take place in every molecular structure or subatomic structure or subatomic resonance. Okay, and the neutral component of all of those is just as critical as the polarized component because it allows the transmutation of elements to take place at a subatomic level, and it allows for the instantaneous attraction of energy from dimension to dimension, with that neutral component being a key driving factor to that. And then the manifestation of the polarities is like the manifestation of what we get like in our universe, which brings me to the next point. Is there's an infinite variety and expression of this energy. So at the subatomic level, there is throughout the universe, the subatomic level goes essentially infinitely deep. Kind of like the universe in this model would be essentially infinitely large, with essentially an infinite number of universes with no age on time. So the Big Bang Theory does not exist in this model. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, because it's not a chaotic model, it's highly organized. Now it looks chaotic in some ways when we're observing the universe, but there is an incredible amount of order in the chaos. Now that's the next point, is there is a randomness to the flow of energy in this model. So one of the reasons why it's so difficult for scientists to document the exchange of this etheric exchange and this energy is because it moves in a random fashion. So it has a random sequence that is in a repeating pattern. So like there'll be a lot of randomness, and then a section or a certain like what would you call it, like a segment of energy, and then that will repeat and repeat and repeat over and over in random sequences. The bottom line of that is the system is designed to create a random expression throughout the universe that's non-repeating. And so like snowflakes would be an example of that, but it would be everything throughout the universe. The ultimate manifestation is a randomness expression of everything, and even the exchange of energy is random. So then that gets to the next point of this, is that the energy is interdimensional. The primary method of exchange through the dimensions is a vortex. And so as the energy moves, depending on the molecular system that it's coming into, can help regulate the speed of that system. But there are certain times when the energy moves at a nearly infinite velocity, especially when it has a predominantly neutral component. And so it's like that kind of is backed by a lot of quantum mechanics experiments. So when you have like quantum entanglement or instantaneous action at a distance, that is an integral part of the magnetic energy model. So now here comes the next point, and I'm just flying through these. Wherever you see an expression of a field, So like that could be like the magnetosphere or an electromagnetic field, a magnetic field, whatever that is. And there's essentially fields around everything all the way down to the subatomic level. But when you have an expression of a field, that is typically the point, like the edge of that field is the point where there is an interdimensional exchange of energy. So when scientists sit there and say, well, the neutron has this incredibly short lifespan, it's over, we can't detect it anymore. What's happening at that point is they are exchanging at an interdimensional in an interdimensional manner. So they'll be in vortices. They'll always be in a vortice form, vortices upon vortices and interlocking vortices like crazy to the nth degree, to an infinite number. And even in like certain, even like molecular structures that would be like even a rock or something, have just a tremendous amount of interlocking interdimensional vortices that are always exchanging energy. And so the vortice offers not only that point of transference through dimensions, but it also offers the point of transmutation of the energy from a higher dimension, or what you could call a higher dimension. And I'm using the word dimension, by the way, very loosely because there's other ways that you could describe it, but in our language that helps us to kind of get this whole idea. So it's the energy is moving through a dimension, through a vortice. It gets the attracted into, like, say, our dimension, where it performs a function very quickly, takes on certain polarized energies, keeps enough of that neutral energy so that it goes zipping back into a higher dimension and then back into a flow to its next system. Okay, so it's this whole idea of exchange of energy and going through vortices is very critical. Now the next component is sacred geometry. So the universe manifests in sacred geometrical patterns, and that could be ratios, spirals, and of course ultimately the torus. The torus is the full manifestation of the torus is typically two counter-rotating fields that express an exchange of energy from one dimension to another and then back. Okay, so that center point on that torus, that toroidal field, that neutral, where you could say is that neutral point of energy, that neutral exchange, and the toroidal field manifests everywhere from subatomic levels up to galactic levels. There's that exchange of energy that's happening in a toroidal field that is predominantly how the energy manifests, because if you take interlocking vortices and the full expression of those becomes a toroidal field. A black hole, and there are no black holes in the traditional model in the in this magnetic energy model. So just in this sense, a black hole would not be the result of a star that has exhausted its core material and either went into a supernova or collapsed or whatever, because stars are not isolated systems. So a black hole would be half of the toroidal field that the other half is manifesting on another dimension, in an interdimensional level. So that the black hole, as scientists have labeled them, would be like an exchange of energy in our system that is like an ultimate return going to through another dimension. Okay, so they're very important, and they're not just like dead stars. That's crazy. So the other point that then feeds into is all the systems are open systems. So everything from our bodies to molecular structures to planets, solar systems, and galaxies and beyond, they're all open systems with flowing energy through them at all times. And that's how everything manifests, is through that exchange and that flow of energy. So even in a star system, you wouldn't have the death and collapse of a star because it ran out of energy, because energy is always coming into the star, always interdimensionally speaking. Now there could be other reasons why the star goes through certain life cycles, but it has nothing to do with it running out of fuel, because the fuel is an interdimensional magnetic etheric energy that is always supplying the star. So a star that is a typical star can last for an unlimited time period, if that makes sense. So because all it does is it's always being renewed with an exchange of energy that's interdimensional, that lasts, there's an unlimited supply of that. Now, from a planetary model, when you have certain magnetic fields, and this is great because scientists have just verified this at a smaller level, but there's been astrophysics and there's been articles on this, and they're just like tapping into this concept. But it's this idea when you have certain magnetic fields, and now I'll bring in our part of it, when they're being pulsed and they're being compressed in a system like a planetary system or a star formation, those fields can contribute to the formation of elements. So like for example, the planet Earth would be drawing in magnetic etheric energy at all times, and in the interior of the planet, according to the resonance and the resonant frequencies of our planet, that magnetic pulsing and that magnetic compression and that magnetic expression of energy on the interior of the planet contributes to the formation of additional elements and ultimately contributes to the expansion of the planet over billions of years. And so there's no end in sight for planetary growth, if you will, and existence, because that exchange of energy is happening all the time. That brings me to the next point, is in the model is the universe functions at 100% efficiency at all times. And so science is really caught up in this idea of entropy and empiricism and everything's degrading. But as soon as you start incorporating the idea of an open system and an interdimensional exchange of energy that is magnetically encoded and encoded at the subatomic level, you start to see that anytime like there's no destruction of energy, there's a transmutation of energies, there's an exchange of energy, and then that energy is circulated through a system that comes back. So, and it's renewed, it's revitalized, it's restored, it's reneutralized, and it comes back and it continues to have formation and destruction is all part of the life cycle. But there's no end to that. There's at a subatomic level, it looks chaotic, it's random, but it's also incredibly highly organized in the sense that the magnetic resonance polarities that exist at a subatomic level determine where all the energy and particles go and the trip that they take through the universe. So it's not just a random process in the sense that like billiard balls across a pool table. It's random in its sequence, but it's a very organized system, if that makes sense. So, and now when we look at the expression of magnetic energy, we have to look at there's three primary factors, and this is another part of the model, is you have this idea of the magnetic resonant signatures. It's a resonant universe, right? Like Tesla used to say, it's a universe full of resonances. So you have three primary factors that determine the resonance of what's expressing in our universe. And the first one is the elemental signatures of the magnetic subatomic resonance. So the resonance that is being expressed through the system is influenced by the elemental expressions or signatures around it. So then so that's number one. Number two is the pulse rate. So as you have a certain buildup of energy and the release of energy, you get pulse rates that can be relatively slow to very fast, depending on the system it is, the complexity and the size of the system. So then you have the ability to have pulse rates that are all across the board. And once those are all documented, that really opens the gate to understanding a whole new level of theoretical physics and how matter is assembled and formulated and then destroyed. If you want to, it's not ever really destroyed, but transmuted. Then the third thing is the intensity. It's the intensity of the energy, and that's largely created from the attraction of the energy through that system. So you can have a very intense level of attraction through a system, and that creates a high level of intensity in that system. And when you combine that with pulse rates and then resonances, then you lead to things like an expression of gravity. So in the magnetic energy model, there's no such thing as dark energy or dark matter, because you don't need those to compensate for gravitational expressions, as scientists and astrophysicists and astronomers have been looking at throughout our galaxy and beyond, and trying to explain why gravity is expressing the way it is. In the magnetic energy model, gravity is not an expression of mass, it's an expression of a compressed magnetic or etheric energy pulse rate system. And so I go into more detail on a lot of these topics in other videos, but this is a summary video. so gravity has a multitude of different expressions and a multitude of different resonances. So you can have objects that move extremely fast, you can have objects that move slower. It's going to depend on the pulse rate and the intensity of the draw in that system. So that this model can perfectly explain and predict, especially once the subatomic resonances are mapped, and they are mathematically mapped as well. It will explain and predict all of the gravitational anomalies that appear to be happening throughout our solar system and beyond, and why things move at different rates, and why it's not simply a function of mass. It will explain all of that in perfect detail, to the point where it will also give us the equations, the exact equations that we need for hyperdimensional, beyond the speed of light travel. And that's really important, because we have to get to that level. Like if you just were to go out right now, what we're looking at, obviously what we look up at stars has absolutely nothing to do with where that system is at. Currently, you could head toward that and you'd be so far off, the space travel would be a joke, even at the speed of light. But when you're looking at a magnetic model, we look beyond space, we look beyond time, we're looking at magnetic resonance signatures, and so we are looking at real time where the systems are, and then we're using attract fields, just like the universe functions. We're using attract fields to get to our destination beyond space and beyond time. And so that it brings in a whole new dimension of space travel in the magnetic energy model. Now, also, we have a part of the magnetic energy model is the incorporation of consciousness into the model. Because everything is interconnected throughout planets, throughout stars, throughout our whole system, including us, including our physical manifestation in this reality, in this universe, everything is interdimensionally and even dimensionally connected through magnetic resonance vibrations that move beyond the speed of light. So like an example of that will be the validation of things like astrology, and how that can actually work, and how those influences can influence us even down to a subatomic level, and influence our and societies at whole, planetary energies, and why things like solar eclipses and lunar eclipses, like that's happening today, and how these can influence human energy fields and human energy consciousness and behavior and consciousness on the planet. And so as you move into this model, the interconnectivity of everything becomes so critical. It's such a huge part of the model, and it leads to this idea of human beings being able to be self-governed and have self-sovereignty, if that makes sense. So when you have the advanced technology, and then you have an advancement in consciousness, and you have an inner knowing to where you no longer need to depend upon authorities to tell you what is right or what is wrong for you, because you have an inner knowing and an inner guidance of what is true, and that inner knowing and that inner guidance is an interconnectivity among all life and all people, a oneness that you know deep in your heart to be reality. So it's like this incredible, like, unconditional love for all life, all people, a nurturing and supporting of all people, without the need to look to outside of ourselves for another authority to tell us what is right and what is wrong, and what we need to do with our bodies and with medication or with technology, and how we need to live our lives. So it's this idea of, really, it's self-governing and it's self-sovereignty. And so that leads then to an economy where you could say it's like a free purchase economy, because with this technology comes the end of scarcity as we know it. So and I'll do another video on that, on the different revelations or manifestations of this technology, and that results from this model. But it's this idea that you have a heart-driven economy, so like that is not based on scarcity. So we no longer need to buy and sell or trade or have a market economy or whatever if you want to call it socialism or communism. All of those things completely fade away because each person has everything they need. They have everything provided to them at no cost. There is no need for money of any kind anymore. And you have this idea of like your self expression and what you create is meant for someone else at a higher consciousness, at a heart level. So you may, like, an example of that may be someone creating a painting. Okay, so an expression that they have created from a heart space, from a higher level of consciousness. And so what's the price on that? Like, how do you put a price on that? You don't. That painting, then another person comes along at some point, and both the creator, the artist, and that receiver of that absolutely know 100% that that piece of artwork was and is meant for that other person at a heart level. It touches them deeply. It helps transform their energy. It helps transform their consciousness. It teaches them something that they really needed to know. It provides them with an experience that's extraordinary. Whatever it is, that becomes the foundation of an economic exchange. Even though there's no money being exchanged, it's the exchange of goods at a heart level to support other beings in their ascension process. I hope I'm saying it clearly because I'm trying to, but this is such a weird thing to try to explain when we are so wrapped up into scarcity and money and being economic slaves of a system. The freedom of all of that results in this incredible expression that supports people's higher path of consciousness through an expression that you can say becomes a marketplace expression. And it goes beyond, so far beyond what we currently think of as our exchange of goods and energy with each other. It goes to this whole new level that supports us, and we support each other in a magnificent way that we can't even comprehend right now. So, let me think. If I think I've gotten everything that I meant to cover on this, this has been a quick video, and I think we have everything, and there'll be time for other videos if I'm meant to do a second part of this. So I covered a lot on this, on what the magnetic energy model, a lot of the things that it incorporates. And I hope that makes sense as a summary video, and I will see you next time. Blessings. Blessings to you all. Take care.